Hi everyone, Amy O here. I wanted to talk to you about the question why. And I know this seems really wild that a person talking about clarity would have a problem with the question why, but in so many of my sessions when dealing with patients, they tell me stories about how they were asking the question why and how they didn't get the response that they wanted. And so I really wanted to dig in a little bit to why is a problem. Now, we would think that by asking a question like why, we would ascertain information that would give us a deeper understanding, move us closer to clarity. However, when we ask the question why, in two different categories, children and adults, we often get responses that are absolutely not helpful. So I want you to think about this picture. And when you look at this picture, what's the first feeling you feel? If you're a parent, it might be, oh my gosh, I've been there. Child's crying. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And I keep asking them, why are you crying? The problem is if a child is in a state of tearfulness or in a state of anger or in a state of frustration, and you ask the question why, they are not able to access critical reasoning skills. They are in an emotional mind, and the emotional mind simply cannot respond to the question why. You're asking them, and it's triggering them to become more and more upset. So if you're a parent who's approached a child and they were in one of those states and you try to get information from them using the question why, you usually get more emotion and you can't calm them down. So it's really important to think about the fact that before you can gain understanding, you have to get regulation. And when a child is dysregulated, the question why amplifies that dysregulation. So before you get an explanation, you have to have connection. So in a situation where you meet a child in a state of dysregulation, anger, sadness, frustration, fear, the first thing you really want to do is provide safety and make them feel comforted. So first it's, oh my gosh, are you okay? I'm here. What can I do to help? And then once you start to see a little bit of calm come over them, then you can start digging into the what happened. What happened is a great question because it doesn't require critical thinking. It just requires description. So if you say to a child who has become a little bit calmer, what happened, they can often tell you. I fell down, I broke my toy, someone took something from me. And then at that point, you can ask further questions. Well, how did that make you feel? So we're thinking about what questions, we're thinking about how questions, we're thinking about who questions, who upset you. Those types of questions will get you further than why every single time and will likely lead you to a more regulated child. So it's really important to think about the fact that you have to get them calm to get understanding, to gain clarity about the situation. So you really don't want to use the word why with kids, especially in an emotional state, because they simply can't access the definition or the information for you. They're spinning out and they're trying really hard because they want to provide you with data, but they can't. So you really want to focus on getting them regulated, helping them feel safe, and then asking questions that open the door to further information. Who, what, when, where, how. Those questions are going to be easy for a child to explain as opposed to why, where they get very overwhelmed and confused. Now I want you to look at this picture. If any of you have been in a couple or even in a conflict with a friend and you have asked the question why, oftentimes you see this face, you see this defense, because when we ask people the question why, especially in a higher escalated feeling like anger or frustration, it kind of feels like you're pointing at them, you're accusing them of something. And there's a couple of interesting things here. Oftentimes when we're asking the question why in an adult relationship, we're really wanting to say, I didn't care for that. I didn't like that. And the direct approach of just stating how you think and feel is probably more efficient, more effective, and more appropriate to the relationship than asking them to define why they did something you don't like. Oftentimes when you ask that question, they have to defend themselves. They usually become escalated. It can end up in a larger conflict than necessary. So I want you to think about the idea of asking those questions like, if it's not just a definition of you have a problem with something, maybe asking the question of, I'm trying to understand how this happened. Or can you explain to me what you were thinking? Or something maybe closer to like, I'm feeling really frustrated and I'm trying to understand. So can you tell me what's on your mind or what prompted you to do that behavior. Because when you say questions like that, you get people back in the thinking mind. Once again, when we put them in that dysregulated state, that defensive state, they're in their emotional mind and it's like fight or flight. So they're dysregulated, their sympathetic nervous system kicks in and they can't give you the real answers that you want. And so then you too become frustrated and are likely to be more escalated. So it's really important to think about when why actually works. And oftentimes it doesn't. And so I really want for each of you to really put in the thoughts of why ask why? And then think maybe there's a better question, because really at the end of the day, we want to gain information. We want to gain insight. We want to gain understanding so that we can operate in our wise mind and make the right approach, do the right thing, have the right action. And so getting that clarity requires maybe a different set of questions. So I just want you to think about that and maybe skip the why next time.